the sun began to make itself scarce, we pulled over to a rest area and Les Mackey crabbed his way up the aisle and into the curtained-off zone where the second driver slept and presumably guarded the videotapes. Moments later, he emerged with a battered plastic tape caddy containing the all-important selections in the popular VHS format.
Got your pen and paper, everybody?
He beamed with the largesse of a man about to reveal the contents of a very fat will.
Tony, you writing these down?
I don't need to, Mr. Mackey. Just hit me with the 4 titles.
All right, here we go, folks. These are the 4 titles you'll be asked to vote on, all of them courtesy of our very good friends at Video Kingdom New Farm. First up, we've got...
This was it. Please don't let it be anything with Dom DeLuise.
Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy.
Not bad at all. A crowd pleaser. Remember, this was the mid-80s in those magic months before the Golden Child and all those leather suits ended Eddie's incredible winning streak. We were off to a good start.
Pretty funny stuff, but a fair bit of gunplay and swearing.
What? Don't say that. In fact, don't say anything. Just read out the titles.
Next up, we've got Excalibur with, Oh, look, I don't recognise any of these names, but it's a King Arthur kind of a thing. Pretty bloodthirsty, if I recall, but the music's not bad. There's a great bit with the theme from the Old Spice commercial.
What the are you saying?
And a little bit of what I'd describe as tasteful nudity.
Good.
And a brief sequence of rutting.
What? Rutting? Who uses the word rutting? That in itself is frankly more disturbing than anything in Excalibur.
And I should warn you, there's one bit where a large black bird pecks the eyeball out of the skull of a corpse that's dangling from a tree.
Except perhaps for that. Between the pecking and the rutting, Les had pretty much eliminated Excalibur from contention. I could feel it in the air. This crowd wanted something with Bette Midler screaming at her husband, not corpses dangling from trees and the theme from the Old Spice commercial.
Selection number 3 is one I haven't seen myself.
Good. Hopefully there'll be no editorialising.
It's called Six Pack.
Les scanned the cover. What? What the hell is Six Pack?
With Kenny Rogers as...
Did he just say Kenny Rogers?
A washed-up stock car driver who finds himself in a mess the size of Texas when he inherits 6 mischievous orphans on the day of the big race.
Did he just say orphans? Mischievous orphans? And was there something earlier about stock car racing?
That's sun-tested waters, that one.
Right, so obviously we're not going to be watching that one. What's selection number 4?
As is number 4, which is a documentary.
Documentary? I hadn't considered the possibility of a documentary.
Called This Is Spinal Tap.
Holy bejesus, Spinal Tap? I didn't even know you could get it on video yet. I'd seen This Is Spinal Tap in a one-off screening at Brisbane University the year before. There were about 20 of us in the audience, and by the end we had all laughed so hard and so much we could literally laugh no more. We staggered from the theatre in a daze. It was the funniest film any of us had ever seen, and the chances of anyone on the bus having seen it were virtually nil. It had never gotten a proper release, and most people, if they knew of it at all, thought it was an actual documentary about an actual heavy metal band. Les Mackey was sitting on gold. Spinal Tap would bring the house down, and it was pointless to even entertain the possibility of it being one of the other 3. Not even Beverly Hills Cop, which surely everyone had seen, could compete with Spinal Tap. It was perfect. It simply had to be. And they all voted for Six Pack. Perhaps I shouldn't have made the speech, but I wasn't the one who started it. As soon as Les had finished his spiel, a rather high-pitched woman right up the back stepped into the aisle and declared that the Kenny Rogers one was the only one that sounded fit for family viewing. Several elderly women chorused their support, but what they all failed to mention was the fact that, remarkably, there were no children on the bus. We were all adults here, and surely we could handle the odd mother if it meant getting to watch a movie that was at least halfway decent. The call for family values was echoed up and down the pensioner-controlled tube, with the odd half-hearted Beverly Hills Cop thrown in for good measure. No one wanted Excalibur, but to my astonishment there was one call for Spinal Tap from a solitary beardo 4 rows back. I had at least one ally, but nowhere enough support to swing the vote. There was no other option. I'd have to make a speech. Les, if I could just say a few words, I ventured. Who are you? Squawked an old bird down the front. I'm a passenger, I announced, seeing off any possible support I may have had right there at the outset. And before we all decide,
I think we've decided, haven't we?
I'd just like to put in a word for Spinal Tap. Boos. There were boos.
It's a documentary.
Someone spat in apparent disgust. No, it's not, I attempted. It's a comedy, a really funny comedy disguised as a documentary.
What piffle?
Someone snorted. I realised I made it sound too highfalutin.
Who's in it?
Shit. I couldn't say Christopher Guest or one of either Lenny or Squiggy. Meathead's in it, I said in clear desperation.
Who?
Meathead from Archie Bunker, and he directed it. That didn't help. Billy Crystal's in one scene. I was flailing.
Who?
This was before When Harry Met Sally. The next comment, seemingly from Norman Bates's mother, cleared up the confusion.
The gay one from Soap,
she hissed, triggering a wave of disapproving tongue clicks. I had one final gambit. Patrick McNee's in it? You know, Steed from the Avengers?
What, in a heavy metal documentary?
Said a sceptical fat bloke.
You're talking through your ass, mate.
He was quickly admonished for his ass. Listen to me, I pleaded. It's incredibly funny. It'll be so worth it, I promise you.
Six-pack! Let's have six-pack! Kenny Rogers!
I fully expected someone to start a chorus of "You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille." Hey, I like Kenny Rogers, I said as convincingly as I could. But don't you just get the feeling that Six-Pack is going to suck? Apparently nobody did. But I had nothing to lose. I mean, does anyone remember it coming out at the movies?
I don't remember Spinal Crap coming out at the movies,
contributed someone, and sadly Spinal Crap did get a laugh. How about this? I suggested, my welcome long since worn out. We put on Spinal Tap, and if after 10 minutes nobody's laughing, we'll turn it off and put on Six-Pack.
But what about the language?
Said the original speaker, returning to her theme. There's a little bit of language, sure, but it is funny, and as there's no children here, Luke my love pump. It wasn't a helpful interjection, and I couldn't help but notice it came from the mouth of my one supporter. He was grinning from ear to ear, but Les Mackey wasn't amused.
What did you just say, young man?
He repeated it, adding, "It's one of the funniest lines from the movie, from Spinal Tap." Cue mischievous orphans. During my pathetic entreaty, I'd seen Tobin and Merrill and Tomes slowly but surely lose all respect for me. To them, I was now the mad guy who tried to make us watch a disgusting documentary about c***ing. I slumped sulkily in my seat as Les fired up the video in order that Kenny Rogers and his wholesome brood might cleanse us all of the filth that thin man with the New Zealand accent had ushered aboard this otherwise family-friendly perambulant. Six-Pack began predictably enough with tracking difficulties. After Les had pulled over, fixed it and rewound, we were treated to the title sequence a second time. This featured Kenny in a hairstyle so altogether ludicrous it just had to be real, piloting a pickup truck through the countryside. As he drives, Kenny's character, the washed-up stock car driver, listens to the radio, which is playing a song by Kenny Rogers. For a brief, hopeful moment, I expected that the film would feature a scene where Kenny's character and the real Kenny meet up via the magic of early 80s split screen. But no, it remained an unexplained movie coincidence that a song by Kenny Rogers was being enjoyed by an anonymous everyman who happened to look exactly like him. As one unsurprising occurrence blandly followed another, there descended upon the bus the warm, calming glow of PG familiarity. It was like any Disney movie of the week, with haystacks and wisecracks and plaid shirts and a jaded but lovable good old boy ready for redemption and a montage at the hands of those crafty but warm-hearted orphans on the day of the big race. There seemed very little likelihood of anything offensive happening beyond possibly the title song performed live in a bar scene by its author. Then, about 10 minutes in, something happened that nobody could have predicted. It was Kenny's first scene with the orphans. He was rescuing them from a river, don't ask, when the little one, the most mischievous one, turned to his bedraggled rescuer and said, "Mister, you look like shit." It was like we'd hit a roo. But no one could say anything because this was the movie they'd settled on. This was the one they were going to have to stick with no matter what. And besides, perhaps it was a one-off or a mistake. In 1986, South Park was still a decade away, and in movies, children didn't say things like, "You look like shit." Or holy shit, ass, bastard, chicken shit, holy shit, son of a bitch, no shit Dick Tracy, and holy shit, all of which quickly followed in the initial shit's disgraceful wake. This was the most foul-mouthed moppet in the history of cinema. Even Kenny was powerless to stop him, although he didn't seem to notice it till around the 70-minute mark, and even then he earned a pointed chicken shit for his trouble. It was around here that Les Mackey announced to the bus, "I hope you're happy, Martin," thus instantly upping the swearing ante and undoing what little work Kenny's misty-lensed final act change of heart was doing to stem the torrent of infant-generated abuse. "Only the Kenny Rogers one, chicken shit, sounds fit for family viewing, arse." As the end credits rolled and the real Kenny Rogers belted out another reason not to buy the soundtrack album to Six Pack, the bus fell silent. Nobody said anything for several dark kilometres. The evening had been ruined, and it was all that guy up the front's fault. When we were awoken, around 4 in the morning, Les had been replaced by the other driver, fresh out of the packet and unaware of the six-pack affair. He announced to the semi-comatose crowd that we would be stopping for breakfast at the finest breakfast restaurant in all of Dubbo. Like zombies after a big night on the tear, we shambled into the blindingly bright aquamarine breakfasting area of a restaurant that seemed to be constructed entirely from aquariums. We were about to chow down on breakfast at 4 in the morning amid dazzlingly lit denizens of the deep in Dubbo. It was like we were dreaming breakfast. No one was saying anything, but as I queued for plastic cutlery, I began to sense a distance from the other passengers that was something more than the haze of interrupted sleep. I'd only been trying to help, and now no one wanted to sit with me. As I huddled over my dishwasher hot bowl of cold milk and rice bubbles, and shimmering reflected fish shapes danced across my empty table for 10, I recalled the words of a man who had once said, "You've got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run."